Hey, thanks, Jill, and thanks to everyone for joining this webinar. It's been fascinating. I'm honored to anchor it here, so thank you all for your time. So I'll just quickly introduce who UFA is and do a quick overview of what I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes and then jump right into it. We are the Urban Forestry Administration in the city of Washington, D.C., and we have two primary missions. The first is caring for the district's street trees, of which we have approximately 140,000. And we also administer the Urban Forest Preservation Act, which regulates the removal of trees on private property. And what I'm going to do in this presentation is discuss a few of the ways that we've put a range of UTC data to work protecting and enhancing DC's urban forest. Okay, so this map shows existing urban tree canopy at various neighborhood scales across the city of Washington. And when it comes to urban tree canopy, one study is good. It helps us identify the distribution of canopy resources and opportunities for expansion. And it enables resource managers, such as our group, to plan for canopy stewardship. But if one of these studies is good, then two are even better. By conducting studies over time, we move beyond simply knowing what canopy resources exist and where they are to how the canopy is changing. This map is showing the change in canopy over a 5-year reporting period on those same neighborhood boundaries. Obviously, gain is shown in green and loss in red. And so if the initial study provides a basis for managing the canopy, follow-up studies provide an opportunity for understanding how effective our plans for enhancing and protecting the canopy have been. We can also compare canopy change over time with other data sources, such as the tree removal permit data that we issue and regulate. And we can assess levels of compliance with those regulations across the city, which is vital to understanding some of the drivers of urban tree canopy change. This map shows, again, the same tree canopy loss in red and gain in green, and these somewhat transparent circles of different size are private tree removal permits. The larger the circle, the greater the aggregate diameter of trees removed from the site. And you can see that in some areas, such as in the far western part of the city, we have a really tight correlation between canopy loss and removal permits. So we have a good understanding of what's driving the change over there. But in other areas of the city, the change is less well understood. So in, say, the southeast section of DC, we have areas of high unexplained canopy loss with few permits. And that helps us identify areas that require additional outreach, greater vigilance among our arborists, and from time to time, enforcement. So for instance, here's an undeveloped block in that same southeast neighborhood. It's the type of block that is more vulnerable from a tree population standpoint to unregulated tree removal. And our team is aware that sites like this are vulnerable, so we're on the lookout for things like this, which is the trees being removed, which happened on this site. So all those trees got cut down, but once we noticed that had happened, we were able to immediately gather details about where the trees had been to try to solve what had occurred on this site. And so now I'm going to kind of pivot from how we've used conventional urban tree canopy studies to sort of gauge what's happening in the city's tree canopy and how effective our management plan for enhancing the canopy and caring for it, to how we follow up using some additional tree canopy data that was discussed earlier, such as LIDAR, to actually drill down to sites like this and solve what happened and seek some enforcement. So to solve what's happened in sites like this, we've incorporated LIDAR data from which we can determine the height of the trees that had been on site. And we can use this height data in a traditional forestry trunk taper equation to interpolate the diameter. And you see that little geoprocessing model at the bottom of the screen is the model we used to determine diameter of the trees that had been on the site. But of course, you can also just construct that same model in an Excel sheet using very basic formulas. And so we were able to use the points, the LIDAR points. Those are vegetation-only points that you're looking at. to accurately interpolate the diameter of the trees that had been on site. And from that, we can use those that data point to assess the corresponding fine to the property owner, which in this case actually exceeded $100,000. So using this LiDAR information, we can actually accurately measure what's no longer even present on the site. And so I just had to include this slide. This is the Forest Service paper we used when looking for trunk taper formulas that were most appropriate for the project we were doing. And this is actually the way they publish it online. It must have been the only copy they had left when the digital revolution arrived. And so I just love these little scribble notations they've got on it. But in any event, it's a useful paper. If you just search for that title, you can find it. It lays out a bunch of different methods for trunk taper formula. And I should also note that when we did this on this site and others since, we were able to use the same approach on trees that are still present nearby as a proof of concept to guarantee that what we're doing, that the approach we're using is accurately measuring what was present. So in the case of the previous example of those trees that were removed, we found by comparing to other trees still growing nearby that we had arrived at, I think, 4% overestimation. So we're able to control for that when we issue a fine and reduce the total fine by that same amount. It just lends an extra layer of credibility when proceeding with an enforcement action. Okay, and so in the same way that multiple conventional urban tree canopy studies over time is very useful, so are multiple LiDAR data sets over time. And so what you're looking at here, these are the parcels in that previous example. And it's taking LiDAR data sets that were captured when the trees had been present, and then more recently after they had been removed. And then it's doing a simple canopy height, a vegetation height. Now it's doing a change detection analysis, and it's saying, show me, it's taking a look at where canopy has gotten taller since the original data, or where it's gotten shorter or disappeared altogether. And you can see on the right side of the screen, those are the approximate diameters of the trees that had been removed. So it's a very compelling approach to identifying what has gone missing. And it proved very useful in this example because we had, in between these two areas where trees had been removed, is a fairly large forest that remains, and the property owner for that area intends similarly to develop. And so we were actually able, through the enforcement action here, to provide some outreach and education to that property owner who's come to work with us as they make their plans to prepare for development on that site, which bodes well for those specific trees and trees in general. All right, and so I'll kind of wrap up here and talk about the power of LiDAR. A lot of times, if you are in a city or have been working with urban tree canopy studies for 6, 7, 8, 10 years, you probably know that those studies have become more granular, more detailed, more accurate. But a lot of these studies can be biased towards loss, which makes sense because when you have a large tree that's removed, that sort of thing is easily detected. So when you get an urban tree canopy study, it's easy to focus. I don't want to say too much, but it's easy to really focus on all the loss that occurs because some of the very small incremental change that's taking place and accruing on smaller, rapidly growing trees can go unnoticed. And one of the beauties of LiDAR is that it's sufficiently granular that you can actually detect the smaller and more incremental growth. You can detect very subtle changes in tree canopy, which helps to allow you to understand the good and the bad. So not just the loss, but also where you've got gain. And so for resource managers such as ourselves, we can take that and try to understand if the plans we have devised for managing this resource are working. So in the center of this slide, you see an area along a road with lots of dark green, which suggests lots of vegetation height growth. the vegetation there, the trees have gotten taller in between the two reporting periods there. And that's really useful for us because we can compare that with things like this. These are tree planting. This is tree planting data for street trees that we've installed shortly prior to the period when these data were captured. And so it allows us to say, well, this is good. It validates some of the management actions that we've taken, and it also allows us to gauge, that what we're doing is succeeding. We can actually sense and understand that these trees that we're planting to make up for some of the loss that's occurring due to development is actually starting to pay off, that these trees are growing and tree canopy is accruing. So that's what I really wanted to talk about, kind of go through a few examples like that. I will share this if you want to learn a little bit more about the tree canopy in DC. Click on that link. It's a nice self-guided tour through the history of urban tree canopy in Washington, D.C., as well as the steps we're taking to protect and enhance that resource. So I'll turn it back over. It looks like we'll have some time left for questions from everyone.